Hello, I am Joshua P. Warren, and this is Joshua P. Warren Daily. And I've got to be honest with you. A few days ago, I got pissed off about something, and that's something that I try to avoid because I do know that sympathetic resonance is a real thing, and you have to be cautious because you start putting negative, angry thoughts out there. And well, you're going to generate some stuff like that coming back in your direction. But hey, I'm just a human. And what's important is to sort of recognize when you start feeling that way and do something about it. But I have something I want you to listen to, and it has to do with UFOs and aliens. And I think you'll understand why I say if you really think about this, it's probably going to start to possibly piss you off a little bit too. We'll see. But first off, I need to give you all a personal update on my family. And I really don't have the time to be leaving this podcast today, but I looked and I was like, man, I haven't left a podcast in a while. I've been so busy, and I hate to leave you hanging like that because I feel like that all of you are a part of an extended family that I have. And I think it's important to keep you informed, and I like to hear back from you. And so I'm just going to tell you plainly what's been going on here. Aside from all of the filming and the projects and everything that I've been working on, I told you that I had some family coming into town to visit. So here is specifically what has happened, and this is why we're dealing with a family emergency right now. But I think there's something about this that you will find interesting as well. So my wife Lauren and I are both in our 40s. And some years ago, Lauren's mother died of cancer. Her father now lives near Houston, Texas, where he was originally from. He's in his 70s, and he lives with Lauren's little sister Kelly, who is 19 years old. And Kelly hasn't really seen much of our country, and Lauren's father had never, honest to goodness, been to Las Vegas. And so her father decided that he and Lauren's sister were going to do a big ass road trip and drive all the way here to Las Vegas from outside of Houston, Texas, and stay here for about a week and then turn around and drive back. Now, that is a drive of about 1,500 miles. If you look it up, it says that that's supposed to take like 21 hours and 7 minutes if you drove that straight through. And we were immediately concerned because her dad does have some health issues. Again, he's in his 70s. And we're talking about the two of them driving through some very, very remote, rugged territory, going through not just a large chunk of Texas, but, you're talking about New Mexico and Arizona before you get to Nevada, where you often don't even have a cell phone signal. Right here in the hottest time of the year, when literally it's like 110 degrees out there, and a good part of the Southwest is like that. And there are people rioting. A lot of stuff that ordinarily would be open is not open because they're still dealing with this COVID-19 situation. We were concerned about Lauren's father, Charlie, and Lauren's 19-year-old sister, Kelly, making this big-ass journey. But he felt confident that, this was going to be the way to go, and they would stop and they'd see certain things along the way. So we wished them luck. And so they stopped, for example, in Roswell, because both of them are interested in the Roswell crash. But at the Roswell Museum, the museum itself, they said, was closed, but they did get some access to the gift shop, so they were a little disappointed with that. That's interesting because I'm going to get back to Roswell later in this story. So anyway, they went to the Grand Canyon, some other places. Now this is just the two of them, right? And in a little Volkswagen Bug, very efficient, damn near 40 miles a gallon. So when they got to Vegas, it was like I said, I had other things going on as well, but it was like a whirlwind week. So we just decided we'd show them as much as we could show them under the circumstances. I mean, there's a lot that, for example, Kelly couldn't even see because you have to be 21. But for almost a week, from morning to night, we ran around with the two of them and we just had a wonderful time. And so we parted ways a few days ago, and Charlie and Kelly got in the car, said sayonara, and began their journey back to Texas. And they weren't taking the exact same route. They were going to deviate a little bit, see some other places, go through Colorado. And so we felt, well, we're happy that so far so good. Well, yesterday, when they were driving through Colorado near Pueblo, Lauren's father was at the wheel and he had a heart attack. And he lost consciousness at the wheel. Now, Kelly was able to reach over and take some control of the car and, I don't know, put it in park or something and get this thing off to the side of the road in a reasonable place. She said that he started acting like he couldn't breathe very well, and then, he lost his consciousness. Now think about what an angel they had on their shoulders driving through Colorado. If you've never been to Colorado, I'm sure you've seen it in movies on postcards. Big, steep mountains, cliffs everywhere. I mean, they could have easily driven right off a cliff. So they're very lucky that they came to a stop in I think it was kind of like a subdivision type area they were near. So I don't have exactly all the details of what happened, but paramedics came to the scene and he was dead, they said, okay? Dead as hell for up to 5 minutes. And these paramedics brought him back to life. So they gave him all these chest compressions. I don't know what all they did, but they brought him back to life. All I know is his chest is sore as hell right now. And so anyway, they rushed him to Pueblo, Colorado. He went into surgery. And so now here they are in this very strange setting because, none of us have a connection directly to Pueblo, Colorado. It was just a place they were passing through. And so Kelly, was having to sort of like coordinate with Lauren's family, like, what do we do? How do we handle all these different things? So last night was a very unpredictable, up in the air night. And I am happy to report to you that he has pulled through, and there were a lot of people praying for him and doing a lot of magical thinking on his behalf last night. Great guy, by the way, just a wonderful man. I always have such fun with him. And he's one of those father-in-laws who I can talk to him like I talk to anybody, and he doesn't get offended by how whatever I say, he gets it and laughs, and he's not that type of person, You can tell the guy whatever you want, however gruff, and he's been around the block. So you can really hang out with this dude, and everybody loves him. So we're just thrilled that he has pulled through this, and they said that one of his arteries was 100% blocked, even though he went like a year ago and had all of his arteries examined, and they said it was fine. So they put a stent in him. They went through his wrist, if that means anything to you. So that's a little better than some of the other options. And so he is now recovering in the hospital. And Lauren talked to him today. And she said that, he seems okay in terms of, his mind and all that. But so she asked him, well, what was it like to be dead for a few minutes? And he, at this point, all he can say is he has no memory whatsoever of the entire incident. Just 1 minute he's driving down the road, next minute he's in the hospital. I guess that's how it is to him. I haven't talked to him, but eventually I will talk to him more about that. But He did not have anything notable to talk about. So, who knows what that means. But anyway, so now we're in this situation where we have to sort of figure out the best way to get him back home. And we're looking at all of our options, and I won't go into what those are. It looks like that there's a good chance of some travel that Lauren or I may have to do to help with this process. But that said, um, if any of you listening happen to be in the area around Pueblo, Colorado, you might be able to be helpful, in some way as we work on this project of making sure that that everybody, that he and Kelly safely get back to Texas with their belongings and all that. So if you are a listener to this program and you're somehow connected to Pueblo, Colorado, then it does no harm to just email me and let me know. You never know how. Contact at joshuapwarren.com is my email address. There's no period after the P. Contact at joshuapwarren.com. We're still working out the possibilities. We're hoping that he gets released by Friday. And from there, like I say, we're going to look into options to get him back home and get their car back home and everything. So let me tell you, this could have had a very, very sad ending. And we're all going to feel a lot better when he's back home. But sort of that's what we're dealing with right now. And that's what they call real life for you. And I also want to assure all of you from a business standpoint who are waiting for, and most of you have already gotten your golden ratio antenna pendant. For those of you who have not, the factory told me that the rest of the batch will be here tomorrow, and so we will start the process of shipping them out immediately. That's been my goal all along, but I'm asking you to have some extraordinary patience and understanding, because if there are any other delays at this point, it may have something to do with the fact that we have to go off or address some other things for a little while. So I wanted to make sure that you all understood that. So thank you for any positive vibes that you have sent our way. If you knew about this, if not, now you do. Always appreciated. Keep sending those good vibes. But this is just one thing that you have to deal with in life, and it's a really good lesson for you as well, because nobody wants to have a heart attack. Nobody wants to have a stroke. And yet you don't get to live forever in this plane, right? On this earth. Your body has a certain lifespan, and then it breaks down and you die. And there's nothing you can do about it. I don't care how magical you are, how much you pray, how good your relationship is with the Lord. It doesn't matter, okay? This is what's going to happen, and we know that. So try not to be confident now, especially when it's this time of year and it's really hot. Try not to be overly confident, especially if you're a person who is getting up there in years, that you can get out and just pull off a big ass road trip. Traveling is very, very stressful. And I don't know whether or not he would have had that heart attack if he'd come here, but I can promise you we did not take him to the Heart Attack Grill. If you don't know what that is, it's a famous restaurant here in Las Vegas off of Fremont Street. You go in there, and they say if you weigh at least 350 pounds, the meal is free. When you get in there, all the servers most of them are women dressed in skimpy little nurse outfits. Everything they have is gigantic and fattening. And if you don't finish it, they take you up and spank you in front of everybody. And let me tell you, these girls do not hold back, okay? I have not been there, but I have seen plenty of video footage, and they get up there, and I think that's their favorite part of the job, is they like to beat the hell out of a guy who doesn't finish his sandwich. And so there have been plenty of guys who've gone there and actually had a heart attack. So I mean, It's real, man. It's no bullshit. So no, we didn't go to the Heart Attack Grill. But on the other hand, we weren't eating the most nutritious things. And we did get a lot of exercise, but I tell you what, when you're out there and it's just that hot, it takes a toll on you. So do not underestimate what it's like to get out in these harsh conditions this time of year, and especially when the world is telling us there are all of these other crazy things going on. So anyway, there's the personal family update, so you'll know if communication for me is even choppier than it already was. So now that you have that information, of course, I told you that they stopped in Roswell. And the so-called Roswell incident happened in the middle of summer. I believe it was July of 1947. Let me look that up real quick. I bet you that it was around like July 7th of 1947, but I'm not 100% sure. So here's what Wikipedia says. I guess all the lines are a little blurry. They're just saying in mid-1947. Oh, actually, look at this. It says on June 14th of 1947, William Brazel, a foreman working on the J.B. Foster Ranch, noted clusters of debris about 30 miles north of Roswell. So it was in June. And then it says on July 7th, Brazel saw Sheriff Wilcox. And anyway, so it was, this kind of went on for a while. So I guess it apparently started in June, and then it was maybe July before things started really popping up in the Roswell media. So they were out there in Roswell at one of the anniversaries of this incident. And I've talked about this before, how it actually started in this little place called Corona on the outskirts. Not the most popular name these days, huh? With the coronavirus. And I don't know if Corona beer sales are up or down. I bring this up, however, because I told you that something kind of pissed me off the other day. And here is what I'm getting at. I've known about this story for a long, long time. And I probably have seen this interview before, but it's certainly worth revisiting. So Stephen Randolph, as you may or may not know, is a friend of mine, and he and his wife Chelsea Skidmore are professional comedians in Los Angeles. And Stephen, he's really into a lot of metaphysical stuff, and he's actually a very smart metaphysical and paranormal practitioner, if you want to use that term. But he also has some characters that kind of make fun of that sort of thing, which is great. Stephen sent me an email and he said, have you seen this? And what he sent me was an interview that was done in 1990. It was done November the 19th of 1990. And this is now posted on YouTube by the U.S. National Archives. And it has to do with the Roswell incident. It is an interview that lasts, 45 minutes, something like that, with a man named W. Glenn Dennis. He's sitting there in front of a video camera. Now, if you have any connection to the Roswell story, if you've studied it, then you know exactly who I'm talking about. But a lot of people who listen to this podcast don't. So let me explain. Glenn Dennis died about 5 years ago. And he worked at a funeral home that was near the Roswell base. And apparently, sometime in July of 1947, the mortuary officer at the Roswell Army Airfield Base contacted him by telephone to ask what small hermetically sealed caskets that he had on hand. And so he talked to them for quite a while, talked to the officer, and was answering all of these questions like, well, if we ever had some bodies and we needed the tissue to be preserved, how would you handle that? And it's like really picking his brain. So it's kind of one of those situations where you say, well, look, my buddy, he has a question. And so this is a 40-minute interview with him. And one of the things that really makes his story so incredible is that Glenn Dennis, he did have some access to the base because of his profession, and he was friends with a nurse who worked on the base. And after he got this strange phone call, he ended up going to the base. And at one point, he was in a section in a hallway, and this nurse is she looks like she's in shock. I mean, she's saying, you need to get out of here. Something bad has happened. And, at that point, some of the military guys take notice and they're like, who the hell's this dude? And they get Glenn Dennis aside, and he said they brought out some red-headed officer and they threatened him. I mean, it really pissed him off. He said he wasn't doing anything harmful, but they were threatening to kill him if he ever talked about being there. And he was like, I don't know. They were like, nothing crashed here. And if you talk about what didn't crash here, we're going to, like stupid how these guys were so just insensitive. But you have to realize that this was fresh out of World War II. And back in those days, if you pissed off the government, you would get killed. And that happened to even the very first Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal. He took an interesting little dive out a window not too long after he became the Secretary of Defense. And that was about 18 days after the Roswell incident, they say, when he became the Secretary of Defense. So anyway, so he got out of there. So Glenn Davis got out of there. And actually, is it Glenn Dennis? It's funny because in one place it calls him Glenn Davis. And then another place it calls him Glenn Dennis. I think it's Glenn Dennis. I don't know what to think of that. I just now noticed, like, that's weird. But anyway, so he ended up, like a few days later, making arrangements to meet with this nurse. And I think he said the nurse was just a friend. She wasn't like a romantic interest. So they got together at a diner right around lunchtime. And it was real hush-hush. And she told him what had happened. And she said that there had been a crash out there and there were some aliens, some beings on it that were not from this planet. And she even had some sketches that she had made about how they looked, and she described them for Glenn in as much detail as she could. And so he recounts what she told him in this 40-minute interview. And I'm going to play just a few minutes for you when he is describing what she said these bodies look like. And one thing about Glenn here is that, as you can even tell when you're listening to this guy, he just seems like such a salt of the earth. It's like very plain, matter-of-fact guy who's dealt with life and death, working in a funeral home. He doesn't seem like some sensational character. You don't get the feeling he's trying to make up anything. Now, look, there were a lot of people like him who came out and talked eventually and made deathbed confessions. And I believe it was Stanton Friedman who first got this man's story and brought it to light. But I want you to listen to like 4 minutes of him describe what these bodies look like. And you should know that this made such an impact on him that he went on years later to become one of the co-founders of that Roswell Museum, where my father-in-law Charlie and my sister-in-law Kelly stopped on their way into town. Now, I've been there before. As a matter of fact, you may recall me telling you about a TV pilot that I shot, 15 or more years ago for Discovery Channel called X-Ops, where we shot it in Roswell. A lot of very, very strange stuff happened that I believe was eventually covered up. If you don't know that story, then I'll tell you that story again someday. But one of the things we were allowed to do was stay overnight at that UFO museum and use a lot of equipment, thermal cameras and things to do a paranormal investigation, and a lot of very bizarre stuff happened. But anyway, this is just one example for you of a person who was there when this thing crashed, telling you what he experienced. And after you listen to this 4-minute clip, I'm going to tell you why this kind of pissed me off listening to it. So here we go. And by the way, the guy who is interviewing him is sitting away from the camera, so the volume might be a little low on the questions, but you should be able to hear Glenn just fine.
So I went on out and met her. Beg your pardon?
Tell me about lunch.
Well, we, both ordered. I'm not sure, remember what we ordered, but it was just a light lunch. But she was so upset. She looked like she's, in shock is what she really talked like and looked like. And she said, I said, well, I was just curious. The only reason I want to talk to you was curious on what happened. And she said, well, you won't believe it. And she says, I don't believe it either. But she said, I got in a lot of trouble on this thing. I'm not real sure about this. But she said, then she pulled out of a little purse or little pocketbook, whatever she had there. She gave me a little diagram that she had drawn some figures of some arms and face and so on. She told me that this is what, was in those, that it was a crash. It wasn't an airplane, but they didn't know what it was at that time.
These were bodies.
Yeah, but she said we have 3 bodies. There was 3 bodies. She said 2 of them were very mutilated. One looked like it might have walked out, or that it, might have lived a little while. And she explained they were like 3.5 feet to 4 feet tall. The 2 of the bodies were you couldn't identify much because they were practically destroyed, and it looked like maybe that they might have been a predatory animal or something might have been doing some damage on the bodies too.
How did she describe their head and their hands?
Well, she said the head, and in the little drawings that I had, the way she explained it and the way she drew it, that the heads were somewhat larger than a human heads. The hands were long, no thumbs. It was just the long, very delicate fingers at the end of on the underside at the tip of each fingers was a pad-like, maybe a little pad, but it looked like the skin had maybe little suction, like the little suction cups on those. On the no fingernails on the hands. The head, the lips were just a long, narrow, more or less, not full lips like we would have in most of our people, but very fine lined, very fine lips. There was no teeth. That was the inside of the mouth. It was kind of like a real a gums, or maybe it was. She said to explain it. It was almost as hard as if it was rawhide, maybe, at that. The ears. There was only two small orifices on each side of the head, with looked like a couple of small lobes that might some way that might cover both of those, but there was not a protruding ear. And also that the nose, there was only two small orifices in the nose. There was really no nose that was convex. It was all just flush with the face.
Was she emotional about all this?
Very much so. Very emotional. She would have to stop and drink water every once in a while, and also she never touched a meal. All the time we were talking in an hour and a half that we were there, she never touched her meal.
Right after that, the nurse was restationed. He wrote her a letter, and it came back as deceased. Now, that is all I'm going to play for you from his interview that he did in 1990. However, I will post a link to the complete interview from the National Archives. So if you're interested, you can watch the whole thing, and really the whole thing is full of great information. That's really just a sample. So thank you again to Stephen Randolph for sending that. So here is why I started getting kind of pissed off. And that is because when I was in Roswell doing the XOPS project for the Discovery Channel, we were being followed around by weirdos the whole time. Sometimes it was just individuals. Sometimes it was the white Suburbans with the big lenses. We were pulled over and detained by the police for 30 minutes without any explanation. We eventually got some really amazing footage and learned some brand new things that we could present. And turns out the whole thing was shut down, put under lock and key, non-disclosure agreements, never been released to this day. And then you have people like Glenn here tell what he saw and how he was threatened, and I believe him. And, you know, I have a lot of personal circumstantial evidence. Historically, there's a lot of very coincidental circumstantial evidence. And then you have all these deathbed confessions. And then you have people like this man who comes out and tells us this. And I started listening to him. And again, I've probably heard him before talk about this. And I started thinking, you know what? This is real, guys. All right, this is a dude who just happened to be there, who was trying to be a good American, who was treated like shit, who was threatened, and going back to what I was saying about being a mortal, not immortal, being a mortal human being, you only get a certain period of time here on this plane. The max would be 100 years right now. And you know, you and I just so happen to live on this planet right now, in this plane, at this time, when we have these governments full of all these politicians, and we pay our we work our asses off, we pay our taxes, we do whatever stupid bullshit they tell us to do. And these fuckers have aliens from another place out there in the universe. And you don't get to see it. You don't get to see it. You're alive right now at this amazing moment in history when these things are not only there, but we have the science to hermetically seal and preserve and study These things exist, but you don't get to see it during this little period of time that you get to be alive right now. Any of us could drop dead any day. But don't you think you deserve to see something? I understand secrecy and security, and I have looked at this and I've talked about it before and I've weighed the pros and cons, but ultimately, if you just break it right down, I believe that you and I deserve to see this shit. Don't you? I think it crosses a line when they have humanoid intelligent aliens from another planet. Something of that magnitude has happened, and you and I don't get to see it. Even if the world goes all to hell, so be it. So that is what started pissing me off. And what's funny is the more I started thinking about how, as an adult, I am treated like a child by these politicians and government organizations that I help to fund, as do all of us. The more I think about that, the more it kind of riles me up. And so then, right after that, interestingly enough, I saw this article that, this just was published today, as a matter of fact. Published hours ago. This is from foxnews.com. And by the way, I have people who contact me and they say, oh, well, don't read Fox. Don't read CNN. Don't read MSNBC. Look, I read it all right? I understand everybody's got their spin. I read Fox, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS. I read foreign media. I read independent media. I read all the crap people write on the internet. So if you ever tell me that you think that my news source is somehow tainted by some political bias, well, that is offensive to me. So save your breath. So in this particular article, it says classified UFO briefings may have left senators, quote, disturbed, expert says. It says on Tuesday, now we're talking about yesterday, which would have been June 23rd of 2020, the United States Senate Intelligence Committee made the unusual request to ask the Pentagon for a detailed, unclassified report on unidentified aerial phenomena that some believe may not be of this world. One expert thinks this may stem from lawmakers being disturbed by what they have heard. Quote, I welcome this long overdue development. Nick Pope, a former employee and UFO investigator for Britain's Ministry of Defense, said in an email, quote, it suggests that those senators who received last year's classified briefing on UFOs were disturbed by it and were not satisfied with the current Department of Defense position, i.e. simply stating that the mystery objects encountered by naval aviators remain unidentified, end quote. They go on in this article to give some other interesting information. They say that Senator Marco Rubio, instructed the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Defense, and other agency heads to compile data on these unidentified aerial phenomena. But it goes on to say the bill still needs to pass the Senate. Lawmakers are asking for a report within 80 days of the bill's approval. So it makes me feel a little better that some people may be trying, but maybe they need to try a little bit harder. Here's another article that was published yesterday. Listen to this headline, also from Fox News in this particular case. Why some physicists really think there is a mirror universe hiding in space-time. Now, this is a big, long article. So let me see how well I can sort of edit this for you on the spot. A series of viral articles claimed that NASA had discovered particles from another parallel universe in which time runs backward. These claims were incorrect. The true story is far more exciting and strange, involving a journey into the Big Bang and out the other side. So then the article goes on to say that the first paper by Latham Boyle, a physicist at the Perimeter Institute in Alberta, Canada, and his colleagues proposed a mirror universe, a reflection of our universe across time. And even though they get into a lot of very specific minutia, let me try to break this down for you here in a podcast, because I read this whole article and I thought about it. And basically what they were saying is that most scientists are working under the impression that there was a Big Bang. And it says, imagine today's universe as a wide, flat circle sitting on top of yesterday's slightly smaller circle, which sits on top of the yet smaller circle of the day before that. You stack up all the circles from today back to the Big Bang, and you'd end up with a cone standing on its point end. Now let me pause and say that makes sense, right? If you're going to look at it from just one point of view, like there was a Big Bang, it's just like any other explosion you've ever seen, a firework or whatever, and it starts as a little thing, and then it expands into something like a cone. So the article says, when astronomers look deep into space, they're effectively looking back in time. The most distant galaxy we can see appears to us as it existed 13.4 billion years ago, or 400 million years after the Big Bang. Did you get that? So he's saying when you look at this place, this galaxy, you're seeing it as it looked 13.4 billion years ago. So you're looking back in time. Article goes on to say, before that, the universe had a dark age lasting millions of years, where nothing bright enough for us to see formed. Before that, the universe produced the oldest thing we can see, which is the cosmic microwave background, which formed about 370,000 years after the Big Bang, as the universe cooled out of a hot, opaque plasma. Telescopes cannot see anything from before that. The cosmic microwave background. But there's a problem here. The problem is that if you're just looking at that, the cosmic microwave background, it doesn't extend and expand the way that we would expect it to at that same rate. It says you find it extrapolates, it extends. Anyway, look, before I get too crazy with this article, because again, this is a lot to think about if you're like on the subway or something right now. The point of this is that maybe the Big Bang and the cone of events that it created is in fact one half of a double cone, saying that there is in fact a second universe extending away from the Big Bang in time. That this universe that's inside the second cone is too far down space-time for us to see, that anybody who's in that universe might see time run backward from there, from our reference frame here. But beings in that universe would still see cause coming before effect, just like we do in ours. Okay, so things work the same way in their universe as it works in our universe, except if you were to compare people in our universe to their universe, we would actually be operating in opposite manners. Does that make sense? Now, I could go on with this article, and I don't think that would be a good idea because, again, I think I've pointed out the most important parts. But what they're saying here is that there are scientists out there who are open to the folks, within cosmology and astrophysics and all that, saying the model that we have of the Big Bang only takes us back so far to a certain particular point. So maybe we need to be open-minded to the fact that there is a whole alternate universe, at least one, that is the inverse of the universe that we live in, a mirror verse or a mirror universe or whatever you want to call it. And that makes sense because it's like yin and yang, right? You can't have the light without the dark, vice versa. For every action, there's an opposite but equal reaction. This makes sense to me. So you ask yourself, when we see these aliens flying around, are we looking at beings that are coming from the mirror universe, or are these beings that are from a parallel universe? Well, you could make a good case for any of those options. But I want you to understand, I'm not just sitting here rambling on and making up some bullshit for you to listen to. I'm at least trying here. I'm reading you some news stories that are fortunately covering what some of these scientists are saying that seem to ring true for me based upon what I've seen as a researcher and an investigator and, just a guy who reads and thinks a lot. Because again, you're not going to live forever. So while you're here, wouldn't it be nice if you could at least be given some of the information about what is or is not out there? It kind of sucks to think like, yeah, if this was just something that may be out there and we didn't have bodies or pieces of it, well then fine. We'll all be just speculating together. But you have some of these people here in this system who essentially work for us, supposedly. Yeah, right. That's what they're supposed to be doing, who have bodies and some craft, and we don't even get to glimpse it. It's like, look, you don't have to tell us everything. You don't have to give us all the secrets that you've back engineered. I get that. Yeah, we don't want the bad guys to get the infinite power supply that is going to destroy the universe because they're insane. But can you at least give us a glimpse of the other, the neighbors that we have out there in this thing? Before we die, shouldn't we get a chance to see that? You're damn right we should. It's funny, like I was saying, you never know what your life is going to be like. People think all the time they're going to live forever because they just don't want to think about their death realistically. I was reading the other day about Hunter S. Thompson. I thought you'd get a kick out of this. Hunter S. Thompson was the guy who wrote the classic book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which was made into just a fantastic psychedelic movie starring Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro. He wrote for Rolling Stone, Hunter S. Thompson. He created the style of journalism known as gonzo, which may or may not have been a good thing in retrospect, because I think maybe the journalists have gone a little too far gonzo these days, just giving their opinion on everything. But he was a notorious adventurer, drug user, alcoholic, just a guy who lived his life in some kind of a haze, I would think. Halfway here, halfway somewhere else. Occasionally he would manage to pull some beautiful pointed poetry and narrative out of that. And sometimes, he just couldn't. So I'm not going to go into who he was. I'm presuming that, if you don't know, you can look up Hunter S. Thompson and go down that rabbit hole on your own. If you do know who I'm talking about, all you have to do is mention his name. And you're like, okay, I know what I know the type of the type of world we're talking about here of this eccentric writer. And I was reading about his personal habits. And it says here that there was a biographer who spent time with him named E. Jean Carroll. And this biographer described Hunter S. Thompson's pre-work routine. So when he was going to write, here's what he would do. Now, granted, I'm sure he was exaggerating to some extent to magnify his legend, his mythos. But he probably did do most of this, at least in the presence of this biographer. If you've seen this before, you can never hear this too many times. It's really interesting. All right, so here we go. Imagine this is your day. You wake up at 3 o'clock p.m. At 3:05, you have some Chivas Regal, which is a blended scotch, by the way. So 5 minutes after you wake up, you have some blended scotch with the morning papers and some Dunhills, which are cigarettes. Pretty hardcore cigarettes. That's the first 5 minutes of your day. 3:45, cocaine. 5 minutes later at 3:50, another glass of Chivas, which again is scotch, and more Dunhills. 4:05, first cup of coffee and Dunhill cigarettes. 10 minutes later at 4:15, more cocaine. 1 minute later at 4:16, orange juice and Dunhill. 4:30, more cocaine. 4:54, more cocaine. 5:05, cocaine. 5:11, coffee, more Dunhills. 5:30, some more Chivas scotch, except more ice in it this time. 5:45, cocaine. And now we're at 6 o'clock p.m., 3 hours after he has risen, and he has some grass, which is some marijuana, to take the edge off the day. Now we fast forward 1 hour and 5 minutes later to 7:05. Now he has traveled to the local pub, the Woody Creek Tavern, for, well, his lunch, which includes a Heineken, 2 margaritas, coleslaw, a taco salad, a double order of fried onion rings, carrot cake, ice cream, a bean fritter, Dunhills, another Heineken, cocaine, and for the ride home, a snow cone, which in his case is a glass of shredded ice over which is poured 3 or 4 jiggers of, yes, his favorite, Chivas scotch. Now we're up to 9 o'clock. He's been awake for 6 hours. Now, says he starts snorting cocaine seriously. Now at 10 o'clock, an hour later, drops acid. 11 o'clock has some chartreuse, which is a green liqueur, if you don't know what that is. some more cocaine, and some more grass, some more marijuana. 11:30, cocaine, etc., etc., whatever that may mean. Now at midnight, Hunter S. Thompson is ready to write. So, for almost the next 6 hours, from 12:05 to 6 a.m., as he's writing, he has chartreuse, cocaine, grass, Chivas, coffee, Heineken, clove cigarettes, grapefruit, Dunhills, orange juice, gin, and the whole time has continuous pornographic movies playing in the background. Now at 6 in the morning, after damn near 6 hours of high quality literature being pumped out, he goes to his hot tub for some champagne, some Dove bars, and some fettuccine alfredo. A couple hours after that, he has some halcyon, and I didn't know what that was, but it's some type of controlled substance that's used to help you sleep. And then about 20 minutes later, he's sleeping. Goes on to say that's a writing day. On days when he was not preparing to write, Thompson's breakfast routine was a bit more restrained. 4 Bloody Marys, 2 grapefruits, a pot of coffee, Rangoon crepes, a half pound of either sausage, bacon, or corned beef hash with diced chilies, a Spanish omelet or eggs Benedict, a quart of milk, a chopped lemon for random seasoning, and something like a slice of key lime pie, 2 margaritas, and 6 lines of the best cocaine for dessert. And by the way, they say if his drinking habits ever got the better of him and he needed a quick go-to hangover cure, that would be 12 amyl nitrates and as many beers as necessary. I'm not even going to get in to what that means. Now, I bring that up because, as far as I know, that guy never had a heart attack, never had a stroke. He did have some physical problems. He fell and I think broke his hip or something like that. And yeah, you can imagine how he might fall once in a while, right? But he lived his life that way and was functional, was productive, was a millionaire for his writings, did speaking engagements, was on TV talk shows. A well-respected man. And what did he end up doing? Well, he ended up committing suicide when he was, I believe, 67 years old. He was sitting at his desk and at his place there in Colorado in his house, and he just pulled out, I guess it was a 45 or something like that, and put a bullet in his head. His friend and collaborator Ralph Steadman wrote, quote, "Hunter told me 25 years ago he would feel real trapped if he didn't know that he could commit suicide at any moment. I don't know if that is brave or stupid or what, but it was inevitable," end quote. So, isn't it something how you can have a guy like that who almost makes you think he could live a lot longer? Okay. And you know, he would have been, I'm sure, if to whatever extent that is accurate, I'm sure that he was, without a doubt, doing a percentage of all that stuff every single day for decades and decades and decades, and maintained enough about his brain and his sensibilities and whatnot, maintained enough to keep going and writing and doing speaking engagements and all this kind of stuff. Until finally he was like, okay, enough is enough. And he took himself out. When you start thinking about what it is to be a mortal human being, and again, I'm talking about a mortal human being, it is funny how it varies so much from person to person. Some people are able to treat themselves like that and then say, well, damn it, this hadn't killed me, so I'm done with it. Pow. And then you have people who live as healthy as can be. Some of them are young athletes, don't do any drugs or anything. And all of a sudden, it's like some kind of lightning strikes and they end up dead on the field. It's weird, isn't it? So you get to live, but who knows how long? However you treat yourself, who knows how long you get to live? So I want you to think about the fact that you're here right now. You're alive right now. You are with us. You're with me. You're with everybody else. You are with us right now for this limited period of time. And somewhere out there, there are dudes who have aliens and UFOs, and they're not going to let you see it. That ought to piss you off a little bit. Somewhere deep inside, that ought to piss you off a little bit. Anyway, I was on Ghost Adventure. Actually, you know what? Let me rephrase that. Ghost Adventures, the TV show on the Travel Channel, they hired me to bring them a Tesla coil and some Van de Graaff machines for a series that Zach Bagans did this month, and he interviewed me for it. He did not use my interview. He said they didn't have enough time, but my machines made it onto the show and were actually a pretty interesting part of the show. So at some point, I'm going to see if I can do like a little screen capture and show what happened when they brought my Van de Graaff machines into a very haunted and creepy part of his haunted museum here in Las Vegas, because now my equipment is just becoming more and more haunted and more famous. And so eventually, when I open up my own space here in Las Vegas with all my goodies to show off, if you're into Ghost Adventures, I can be like, hey, look, this is the shit that was used on that Ghost Adventures episode that created this effect. So it's pretty good stuff. So thank you again to Zach and everybody at the Ghost Adventures crew and my Tupelo and my entertainment for having me on there. You know, a lot of times when you go, if you're into the Ghost Adventures, they have Patty Negri, the Good Witch, who is featured on the program, and she interviewed me a while back on her podcast, which she also videotapes, and I think that's going to be released on Friday. So if you're interested in that, I'll be sure to post it for you on my Twitter page. So look, guys, I have a lot going on. I think I have explained everything to you. So depending on what Lauren and I need to do over the next few days or week, however it's going to work out, I may or may not be giving you some updates. So again, please be patient, please be courteous, please be understanding, and please know once again that we are still doing our best to get your products out to you as soon as possible. And when it comes to the golden ratio antenna pendant, I told you up front what the process was going to be, that you would order it, and then I would turn around and order them from the manufacturer, and everything's all slow because of COVID-19 and all that. So you know what's going on there. But I hope in the meantime, you certainly will go to my website, which is joshuapwarren.com. There is no period after the P. joshuapwarren.com. When you're there, click around, look at all the interesting videos and pictures. If you like it, I want you to send it to other people. Sign up for my free e-newsletter at the site so I can always keep you updated first when I have new interesting stuff to share, or I'm going to give away some money or just do something nutty like that. But go to the Curiosity Shop. Look at the things there that you will not find anywhere else in the world. Handmade, custom-made, specialized stuff. and click the link to this podcast called Joshua P. Warren Daily. Again, please, if you like this, tell people about it, because this podcast is always short, it's always free, it's commercial free, it's uncensored, it is independent. You can subscribe through various means, different platforms, whatever does it for you right there. Simple and easy. Or just follow me on Twitter at Joshua P. Warren, at Joshua P. Warren. And I usually tweet when a new one is available. So that is it for today. Wish me luck. Send me some good vibes. And you know what? Let's send everybody listening to this program some good vibes, right? We're a family. Everybody's got something going on. Let's just send it out to everybody as a collective whole. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your interest and support. Thank you for staying curious. And I will talk to you again soon.